And then, finally, Bob said the worst possible thing. From next month, clear out your room. When my mother gets discharged from the hospital, I'm gonna bring her straight to this house. Living together might make household chores easier, but I'll have to face my mother-in-law and endure her snide comments every single day. I was utterly devastated. I understand. He seems hell-bent on making this happen with his mother. Rather than arguing with him, it's better to discreetly take measures. I've learned that from years of experience. Bob left, not suspecting a thing, and seemed quite pleased. Everything's going according to my plan. It's so simple it's laughable. A few hours later, after tidying up and taking a break, my phone rang loudly. It was a frantic call from Bob. "Hey, what the heck? The house is empty." I am Catherine Rose, a 45-year-old working mother and hold a managerial position at a publishing company. I have a husband and 2 kids. A typical American family. When I got married, the idea of balancing work and family was just beginning to gain traction. It was an era when it was common for women to marry and become homemakers. Bob had allowed me to work. In return, I've given my all to both my job and household chores. After having kids, I've been fully committed to raising them as well. But lately, I've been feeling overwhelmed. My mother-in-law, Mary, who was initially against me working, has started to complain recently. "When are you gonna stop this job nonsense? Leaving your husband like that, you're such a terrible wife. Back in our day, the job came second, our main duty was to dedicate ourselves to our homes. I've been working hard in both my career and home, raising the kids and managing household chores. I always thought of it as repaying the kindness Bob showed by supporting my career. Perhaps seeing my dedication, both my daughter and son help around the house. My daughter does the laundry and ironing, while my son takes care of the bath and fills the tub every day. When I come home, I just have to prepare the meal and clean up. I'm so grateful to my kids, but even though we're both working, Bob doesn't lift a finger. I've asked him to help out several times. But Bob's answer was always the same. "Catherine, I let you keep working, didn't I? You're trying to skip out on your wife duties and make me do the chores because you want to have an easy life? Quit playing the victim." And every time, my mother-in-law would tattle on me, and I'd get an earful from her. "Bob's the breadwinner of the family, you know? And you're trying to make him do house chores? What are you thinking, Mary? This is why it's never good for a woman to work. Be grateful I even let you work. Understand your place." Lately, perhaps she's bored, but almost every night she calls with these snide remarks. It's become so frequent and unbearable that both my kids and I are fed up. My kids have even started pretending they are needed somewhere else to hang up the phone. Sure, I'm grateful they let me continue working, but why all this hostility? I've been the one handling both the household chores and raising the kids. She should know how hard it is to juggle both roles. What more does she want from me? Right now, I'm under so much stress. The only saving grace is that my kids are on my side. The root cause of this is Bob's salary. Truth be told, Bob's pay isn't that great. It would probably be considered on the lower end. He had a tough time finding a job, and eventually landed one at a small company thanks to a family connection. If he'd shown some initiative, I wouldn't have cared about the low salary and would have supported him wholeheartedly. But Bob got down on himself because of the way he got the job. I should have been working at a bigger, more renowned company. In the beginning, he used to mutter things like this. He only ever did the work given to him, never striving for promotions or looking for new job opportunities. Someone truly capable would have studied on the side, or honed their skills to find better job opportunities. But Bob didn't, so he only ever got raises based on seniority. His performance-based bonuses were always the bare minimum. On the other hand, the company I work for is a nationwide corporation that had parental leave policies in place early on. It felt the effects of the economic bubble, but it's a reputable company that's managed to avoid major salary cuts. What's more, I've climbed up to the position of manager. I've successfully handled a significant number of contracts and projects. Naturally, I earn considerably more than Bob. I'm even covering our kids' expenses, using my paycheck to set aside money for their college funds. I've taken full advantage of the benefits of working for a large corporation. Looking back, I feel like I was living off my savings when I took parental leave for my 2 children and had no salary. With Bob's salary, there's no way he could cover all the living expenses with 2 kids. I don't recall ever receiving living expenses from Bob, and there's no record of any transfers. Maybe Bob let me continue working because he thought he could rely on my earnings. Lately, I've been thinking this a lot. Ever since we got married, I've started to wonder if we've mostly been living on my salary. To confirm this suspicion, I looked at my bank book. The rent, utilities, groceries, and the kids' school fees, I've been paying for all of it. There's not a single penny coming in from Bob's account. Eventually, I just laughed it off, feeling drained. Bob's salary is all gone, spent on his hobbies and giving pocket money to my mother-in-law. I've always thought that I owed Bob for letting me continue working. That's why I've been trying so hard with the household chores and childcare. But look at the situation now. I'm covering all the living expenses, while Bob spends his salary freely without saving a dime. When it comes to supporting our lives, wouldn't you say I'm the main breadwinner? Having me cover the living expenses while Bob does whatever he pleases, I'd say I've repaid the favor of letting me work. Yet, Bob's catchphrase is, "I'm the one supporting y'all. If you've got a problem, just leave." What's he thinking, claiming he's the one supporting us? Is he thinking he's covering the living expenses while freely spending his own salary? It's a total mystery, and I just can't understand. If I, who's paying for everything, were to leave with the kids, what would happen? Or if I threw this bank book at him and told him to leave, would Bob just quietly go? But, sticking to his claim that he's the main breadwinner, he'd probably tattle to my mother-in-law. I wonder if my mother-in-law knows about the difference in our salaries. No, if she knew, she probably wouldn't make those snide remarks. She must think he's a wonderful son, supporting his family and even allowing his wife to work. If she knew about the difference in our salaries, what would she think? Would she ditch Bob and cozy up to me? Nah, that's the last thing I'd want. If Bob and I were to part ways, I wonder what would become of him and my mother-in-law. What would they do? Tired of the snide remarks from my mother-in-law, I often find myself pondering these thoughts. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law had an accident at her home and hurt her foot. It seems she's gonna need hospitalization and physical therapy for a while. My father-in-law passed away before Bob and I got married, so my mother-in-law has been living alone. So either Bob or I have to take care of my mother-in-law. Are you really gonna leave me all by myself when I'm in such a state? Come to the hospital ASAP. My foot hurts so bad I can't move, and I've got a ton of things I need done. I quickly received a call from the hospitalized my mother-in-law. The moment I answered, she started with her demands, wanting this and that. I was at work, and whenever I tried to mention it, my mother-in-law would just lash out. I'm swamped with work, so I decided to let Bob handle her. Honestly, getting criticized by my mother-in-law for working is a huge stressor. Right now, it's best if Bob visits the hospital to cheer up my mother-in-law. When I asked Bob to care for my mother-in-law, he immediately began to complain. "Hey, Catherine, why aren't you looking after Mom? I'm working too, you know." Despite being his mother, he just tosses all the caregiving responsibilities to his wife. Wouldn't one think to at least visit her once or twice on their own? Holding back my frustration, I replied, "I have work too, Bob. Plus, all the chores at home. If you'd help around the house, maybe I could visit her. More importantly, I think your mom would be happier if it was you who came to care for her." This is true. Though some may vent their stress by snapping at their daughter-in-law, when one is immobile, it's better to think and talk positively. So, I kept finding reasons to avoid caring for my mother-in-law. Instead, I would neatly wash and fold my mother-in-law's laundry and pack it in a bag. If my mother-in-law asked for something specific, I'd buy it after checking the name of the products she requested. Even if Bob took credit for those things and I got the blame, I didn't mind. I just didn't want to hear my mother-in-law's snide remarks. Thankfully, it seems my judgment was right. My mother-in-law greets Bob with a big smile every day. Apparently, for a mother like my mother-in-law, nothing beats the joy of being cherished by her son. Having her beloved son around must feel much better than dealing with a daughter-in-law she'd want to make sarcastic comments about. Every day, it seems like she waits for Bob to come home from work. She must be really focused on chatting with Bob. She even hands Bob a shopping list note, and she hasn't called me since the first time she was admitted to the hospital. Seeing my mother-in-law's smiling, Bob probably feels he's being a good son. Even after he gets home, he's in a good mood. At night, when Bob returns, he simply hands me the laundry and shopping notes without any complaints. When handing over my mother-in-law's stuff, Bob throws in some sarcastic remarks at me, but still, I was able to live peacefully. Honestly, I just don't want to hear any of my mother-in-law's complaints right now. That's what I murmured to myself in the middle of the night. It'd be nice if things could stay peaceful for a while. But injuries take a toll at my mother-in-law's age. Through Bob, I was pushing hard for her rehab, but my mother-in-law, delighted with her son's visits, tended to skip it. As a result, by the time her injury healed, her legs had become weak. Bob would visit her in the evening after his work. Yet, my mother-in-law would skip her daytime rehab, just waiting in her room for Bob's visit. And after getting a taste of her son's care, my mother-in-law started making all sorts of requests from Bob. She rarely calls on me directly, but when it comes to things like laundry, I'm the one who actually does it. Running errands and doing laundry, even bringing her snacks, became a daily routine. All she did was sit in her hospital room and chat cheerfully with her son, while I did the housework. It was a relief not to see my mother-in-law, but I was worn out. My mother-in-law's requests were many, and shopping alone was a significant chore. I get that hospitals can be boring, but why does she want so much stuff? If her legs have become weak, living alone surely becomes inconvenient. It seems my mother-in-law realized that too. Then, my mother-in-law made a shocking request to Bob. My legs aren't moving well anymore. Shopping and preparing meals have become so difficult. Bob, please don't leave me alone. Of course, Bob sided with my mother-in-law. Right, maybe we should live together. It might be easier for Catherine to take care of you. The two of them were moving in the direction of living together without consulting me. And then, Bob broke the worst news to me. I'm gonna be living with my mother starting next month. Clear out your room. When she gets out of the hospital, I'll bring her straight here. From the perspective of efficiency in doing house chores, it's certainly easier for my mother-in-law to live with us. As for me, I'll have to see my mother-in-law every day and get nagged at each time. My feelings were extremely downcast. Bob acted like it was already a done deal that we'd all live together. I understand, I replied, with little energy. Bob seemed determined to force this co-living situation, no matter the despair I felt. It might be better to secretly make plans rather than argue about it now. I knew this from years of experience. While Bob and my mother-in-law happily planned for the move, I constantly thought about how I could escape. I have my own room where I gather and review work materials. There are many books and files in that room. Whether you call it a study or an office, it's essential for me. Bob wants me to give it up. Without this room, my work would be impacted. I might have to come home even later than I do now. I muttered to myself while staring at the bookshelf. Where should I move all these books and documents? I can't leave them at home if we live with my mother-in-law. They're too important to risk getting thrown away or damaged. It may sound like something out of a TV drama, but I really fear she might throw them out. Especially since she'll probably target what she knows is important to me. And if I dare complain, she'll feign ignorance and run to Bob for support. She didn't know they were important, Bob. Catherine's mad even though it was an accident. Help! There'll be no peace for me in this house once we start living together. I can see her bossing me around and making snide remarks about my work, wearing me out. What should I do? if my mother-in-law is coming to this house? I had a sudden realization. Why hadn't I thought of this simple solution before? It seems living with my mother-in-law and all her nagging wore me down more than I realized. It felt like the fog before my eyes was gradually clearing up. Well, of course, there's absolutely no need for me to hold back. Why didn't I realize something so simple? I mumbled to myself and immediately began making preparations. And as the month changed, the day of my mother-in-law's discharge from the hospital arrived. Bob was all excited, having taken the day off from the start of the morning. Hey, you better take proper care of my mom from now on. Don't think I'm gonna step in like I did when she was in the hospital, he said in a commanding tone. Without responding to Bob's order, I changed the subject. Oh, speaking of which, here. Your mom's been in the hospital for quite a while, right? Hospital food is bland, and they don't give you much. I bet a gourmet like her wasn't satisfied. I think the discharge process and packing will take up the morning, so why don't you take her out for some good food? You took the day off after all. How about a nice drive, just the two of you? I think she'd really appreciate it. I handed Bob a generous amount of cash. I'd set aside some money for living expenses and even Bob's personal spending, but this was more than his monthly allowance. Surprised by the unexpected bonus, Bob's spirits lifted even higher. Well, aren't you thoughtful? All right, I'll use this money and go for a drive with my mom. I'll give you a call when we decide about dinner. Make sure the house is in tip-top shape for my mom, all right? Without a hint of suspicion, Bob happily left. Everything was going just as I had planned. It was almost too simple, I couldn't help but laugh. This should buy me some time. I'm looking forward to when Bob and my mother-in-law return. With that, I continued tidying up the house. I had to finish cleaning before Bob and my mother-in-law came back. A few hours later, just as I was taking a break after finishing up, my cell phone began ringing loudly. The call came in a flustered tone from Bob. Hey, what's going on? The house is empty. That's right, after Bob went to pick up my mother-in-law, I moved all our stuff to the new house we just rented. Of course, I left some of Bob's personal belongings and a bed for my mother-in-law in the room. Oh, you're back already? You told me to clear out the room, so I emptied both the room and the living room for Mom to feel comfortable. From now on, please enjoy your time with her. I responded nonchalantly, which only infuriated Bob. You've got to be kidding me. The living room and kitchen are totally empty. After all I've done to support this family, how could you? There it was, his go-to line. He seemed to believe that saying this put him in a superior position. How naive. No, Bob, I've been the one supporting the family. Including you. Weren't you spending your paycheck on pocket money for your mom and your own hobbies? And yet, you demand an allowance from the family budget. How does that make you the breadwinner? Bob seemed surprised by my resistance, but he retorted nonetheless. His argument, however, was nonsensical. Shut it. I'm the man here. I'm the head of this household. You, as my wife, should just do as I say. Now, put everything back the way it was. No thanks, I bought all the furniture in the living room and all the kitchenware with my salary. The kids are with me, so don't worry. I also paid for the rent, utilities, and groceries of that house. So, in reality, I'm the breadwinner. Why did you decide to live with your mom without consulting me? I can't live with someone so selfish. As you wished, you can be the main provider now. Live your life as you please. It seemed that Bob finally realized my intentions. Hold on, are you saying the rent for this place? I've paid up until the end of this month. But from next month, you'll need to handle it. I've also canceled all the automatic payments for electricity, gas, and the internet, so good luck with that. Bob's words probably tipped her off to the situation. My mother-in-law also started making a racket in a loud voice. How could you do this, Catherine? Just because you have a job doesn't mean you can act all high and mighty. Fine, Bob and I will live here in luxury. Oh, does my mother-in-law not know about Bob's earnings? I hope you can have that luxurious life. That is, if your son can afford it. Anyway, goodbye. Wait, Catherine, where are you right now? I didn't bother listening to the rest of Bob's rant. I hung up and blocked both Bob and my mother-in-law's numbers. The rest is probably as you'd imagine. With the meager salary from his uninspiring job at a small company, Bob was left with very little after paying the rent and utilities. Living in a needlessly spacious apartment, where a family of 4 once lived, Bob and my mother-in-law would constantly bicker. What's with this meal? Can't you provide something better for your mother? Shut up. If you want something else, make it yourself. You're just making excuses, saying walking is too hard after slacking off on your rehab. You don't do anything at home, Mom. You're just wasting time. Having neglected her rehab, my mother-in-law's legs had become weak, and she refused to do any home workouts. Could my legs not move as I wanted, causing my frustration? She started imposing unreasonable demands on Bob, whom she had cherished so much. Maybe she's showing early signs of Alzheimer's. Even adding my mother-in-law's pension, it feels like they're living in poverty. They'd be better off if they moved to a smaller place fit for 2, but it seems Bob hasn't thought of that. He probably tried to contact me numerous times, but I've blocked all communication from both Bob and my mother-in-law since that incident. Of course, my kids did the same, blocking their numbers when we moved. Bob doesn't know our new address, and he can't ask for help. Their living situation will probably collapse soon. I was earning a decent income with the help of my children, so I managed to lease a nice apartment. Each of my kids has their own room. I secured a spacious room that doubles as a bedroom and workspace. The rent might be a tad high, but with Bob out of the picture, I'm saving more than enough. My kids, who were tired of being belittled by their father, are now living freely. They've become more helpful around the house. Helping out without being criticized by their father makes chores feel good, they say. Everywhere, isn't it normal to praise and thank kids when they help? I'm glad my children haven't become bitter. I was headed back to the apartment where my kids awaited. Later, through a lawyer, I served Bob with divorce papers. I lived on my salary, while he spent all his earnings solely on himself and my mother-in-law. That's a valid reason for divorce in my book. Bob tried to argue against the divorce with various points, but my lawyer cut him off every time. The fact he claimed to be the breadwinner but didn't contribute was labeled as verbal abuse and clear financial abuse. If it went to court, Bob wouldn't stand a chance. I got custody of the kids, naturally. In exchange for not seeking alimony and child support, we agreed on no property division. After all, the savings we had for the kids' college were from my earnings. I couldn't let Bob and my mother-in-law take that. The car was in my name, and our house was rented. I'm grateful we didn't buy a house. Now, I can focus on my job without complaints. I want to support my kids in whatever they want to do. With the money saved for college and my future earnings, I should be able to cover their tuition. All right, I'm gonna work hard today.